Hi all, welcome to hand lettering. So we're going to do some crafts this morning and work on our kind of calligraphy, kind of hand lettering, brush lettering. It's a really cool trend that you'll see with a lot of different things out there. So we're going to talk through some of that, but right now we'll hang tight, let a couple people hop on and kind of catch up. So join us here. We'll talk through some hand lettering. If you're joining right now, feel free to go grab some supplies. I recommend some sort of marker or pen or pencil. So I have simple Crayola. It's going to be backwards no matter what when we see it from this view, but don't worry, I'll make sure to not write as backwards. So some markers, some Crayola markers. I've got a Sharpie here, a couple Sharpies here, a pencil, and then a fancier marker that we're going to play with a little bit later on. So some markers, some pens, some paper is going to be really important. So whether that's, I have a ton of little scraps of paper around the house. You can always cut up big pieces of paper to make little small things. These are great to make cards out of later on. I also have a whole book that we're going to look at today, which is just a nice big sketchbook that I use all the time. So you'll need some markers, some paper, and that's pretty much it. And yourself. We're gonna hang here, let everybody catch on. Let's see, there we go. Cool. Hanging tight for just a minute, let people catch up. Feel free to use this time to grab those supplies. Hi, Colleen. Yep, so you'll just need some markers. Any kind of markers work. They don't have to be fancy. I'm going to show you how a Crayola marker works just as well as my fancier markers today. So some sort of marker, some paper to practice on, and then you. And it's really important that you're going to bring your willingness to try today. I know that this can look really intimidating, especially when you see other people do it and do it really well. This is where we're going to talk about practice makes perfect. And that, you know, I started doing this years ago. So over time you will get better and better, and my lettering is just starting to get better. So, you know, it gets better every day, and practice really helps. So you're grabbing those markers, you're grabbing that paper, and we'll get started here in just a minute. Hi, Christy. Awesome. And if anybody has any questions or thoughts on hand lettering, feel free to comment them. I'll let you know that as we're doing this video, Bells and I practiced a little bit. It can get a little tricky for me to see the camera because I want to make sure that you can see the page that I'm working on. So I'll make sure to pause at the end if you guys have questions. So keep putting them down in the comments and I'll make sure to get to them. And if not, if you're not watching this live, if you're watching this later on, I will still make sure to touch base with this video so that I can get you the questions to or the answers to any of those questions. If you are just joining us, my name is Alexa. I'm the assistant camp director. I am not dancing for you today. Instead, we are going to work on some hand lettering. So grab your paper, grab your markers, and bring your best willingness to try. When in doubt, pinkies out. Also, pardon this, you're going to see a nice little bar across my frame today. I have this nice little device that's holding my phone for me so that I can go hands-free, so you can see everything that I'm lettering. Also, it's Earth Day this week, which I'm really excited about, and so I have my leaf earrings on. I have a leaf t-shirt on today, so I'm ready for Earth Day. Cool. I am awesome. Checking on our time. Great. All right, we've got a crew here. I'm excited. So we talked a little bit in prep for this video. You're going to need paper. I showed you that I have, you'll see my big sketchbook. I love my sketchbook. I use it all the time. It's like a handy thing to carry around with me so that I can practice anywhere I go. So I bring a sketchbook with me. I also have these little pieces of paper so that I can do just like small hand lettering on the go. These also make really great cards, and you can just cut up larger pieces of paper to use these. I also always have freestanding paper, so I'm going to show you my stash here. I've got just a bunch of, colored, non-colored sheets of paper, so just your 8x10. Printer paper works great. You'll find that different kinds of paper are really interesting when it comes to hand lettering. Some paper, you'll hear the terms of like porous. So some paper really absorbs a lot of the ink of your markers, and you'll see that the color appears different on that paper than it does on a less porous piece of paper. So there's a lot of really complex stuff. We're going to keep it simple for the sake of this video. And also a good reminder here is that I'm not a professional. This is a really great hobby of mine. I love to, you may have seen at camp, different hand lettered name tags. Mine is not in here right now, but I do like to letter name tags. So that might be ways that you've seen that kind of lettering. And we'll also talk a little bit about how different fonts look different, and all of them are great. So you're getting your paper. And then markers. So let's talk markers for a second. For today, I'm going to show you how Crayola markers can make just as great letters and lines as these really fancy brush pens. So you don't have to get fancy, and especially when you're trying this out and deciding if this could be a hobby for you, I recommend starting really simple. So use those Crayola markers. I started with Sharpies, and I still love Sharpies for lettering. So we'll talk about how you can use Sharpies to make really great lines. And then you can start, if you're a little bit nervous and you want an eraser, pencils are great, as well as I have pens on hand. I have these little Papermate pens on hand, lots of different kinds of markers. So, start with what you have, and I wanted to make sure that we could use lots of markers that you probably have in your own house right now. And then if this is a hobby that interests you, you can always get more markers, but start simple and then we'll grow from there. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and shift you around so that you can see my notebook, and we're going to talk through some things. So we're going to start with brush lettering basic strokes. So brush lettering is, you're going to see this backwards, but I'll flip you around. So mint, that says camp. It's backwards to you, but it'll be forwards here in a second. So this is what brush lettering looks like, and we're going to talk about that first and the fonts and strokes that get you there. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about fonts and things. So let's go ahead and get you situated. All right, here we go. Amazing. So you can see this is my notebook. It's a really giant book that has just a bunch of free pages in it so that I can practice and do whatever I want in here. So that you know a little bit about what our agenda is going to look like for this. So we just talked supplies. We're going to talk a little bit about some basic strokes, which we're talking here. Some just like gentle reminders for you as you're going. We're then going to connect all of those strokes and make some words. We're going to talk through fonts, so different kinds of lettering you can look at, and then we're going to practice and play for a little bit. So as we're going to, if you have words that you're like, I want to see what that looks like hand lettered, even if it's your name, let me know. Go ahead and put that in the comments. I'm happy to practice by using your name. So this is what we're going to talk about. Let's go ahead and start with those basic strokes. I'm going to use green because Earth Day's coming up. So I've got my Crayola marker here. Has a nice pointed tip on it, so that's going to be really important. You want to make sure that you can get both a really thin stroke and a really thick stroke. That's really important to basic hand lettering. So we're going to start with the upstroke. Also, pardon if you hear any loud noises. I've got a car, a busy street in the background, so Oh, I can for sure do rows as a practice. Amazing. All right, so upstrokes. These are your thin, simple lines. So you're just gonna practice going really thin up. And you're just gonna do that a couple of times. Feel free at any point through this video to pause it and make sure that you can practice along. Good, so we're just gonna practice it. So you've got your upstrokes there. They can go on a nice little diagonal like mine were, or they can go in the opposite direction, or they can go straight up. So you're just practicing. What you're really looking for is using just the top tip of that marker and doing some nice upstrokes. Cool. You can also screenshot this if you're watching on like a phone or a device. You can screenshot this so that you can practice. This is kind of my workbook page for this. So you can keep this in your photos and refer back to it any time, or you can always come back to this video and practice along. Good, so we've got our upstrokes done. Let's go ahead and work on downstrokes. So what we're doing here is we're putting a little bit more pressure on the marker to get a nice thick line. So pressure, thick line. Good. Doing that a couple times. You can rotate your marker just to practice what that feels like. You can see the rotation caused a little bit of stress on the marker. That's okay. Good. Nice, thick downstrokes. Rotating. Awesome. So we've got our nice thin upstrokes. We've got our downstrokes. Now let's talk overturns. So you'll see this when we do like a letter M, for example, that your overturn is going to be going from thin around to thick. Good. So thin around to thick. And you're going to have to practice a couple times as you figure out where you put pressure on your marker. So let's kind of do this slow and I'll tell you where the pressure is starting to be applied. So we're going nice and light, 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 light. Keeping it light, and then now we're starting to put pressure on. Good. You see it kind of thickens up here. You'll get really good right in this little space of putting pressure on your marker in the right space. So it gets a little bit easier as you go and do thick strokes. Good. So practice a couple of those with me. Good. Right in there. You're keeping it nice and thin as we go up. Thin as we go around, and then thick as we go down. Good, so you're really combining these two strokes and you're adding a curve, thin to thick. Amazing. Now the opposite, we're gonna go ahead and do underturns. So we're gonna go thick to thin. Think your letter U, your letter W, you're gonna go thick to thin. And that one's really tricky. I still have to practice these a lot as I'm doing my letters. So we're going thick to thin. All right, let's go again. We're gonna go slow so that you can know where I'm applying pressure. So making sure I have a nice good grip on my marker. We're going thick. Here's where I'm starting to let up pressure. And we're going nice and light. Good, so this is all thick as we go down. We're letting it up here and nice and thin. So we'll do it again, thick to thin. Good. So keep practicing that one. We'll keep moving on. Compound curve. So this can get really tricky. You're gonna connect basically your overturn and your underturn to make it one continuous line. So we're gonna go thin to thick to thin. Boom. So you're going to practice that a couple times. Let's talk about where you're putting pressure. So where you're pushing down on your marker just a little bit more to get that nice thick line. So you're going thin, light, 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 light. Similar to your overturn, we're going to start putting pressure on here. Pressure's releasing and we're thin. Good. Think about where you're gonna see that. What letters are you gonna see that in? maybe you're just gonna make a bunch of waves, and that's okay, and that might be where you see that. But a nice thin to thick to thin. Awesome. So we've covered our basic strokes so far. We've done the upstroke, a thick downstroke, a nice thin to thick overturn, an underturn that is thick to thin, a compound curve, which is combining those last two. Let's talk ovals. So you're going to clearly see this in your letter O. You're actually going to see a little bit of this in your C's. You're going to see some of this in your A's. So you're going to make sure that you are doing, so for ovals, make sure you're nicely in the frame. We're going to start thin to thick to thin. And you're going to need to practice here, and you can always go back over your letters to make that connection look just a little bit easier. So let's do that again. Thin to thick to thin. And as you get a little bit more fancy with it, let's talk pressure here for a second, and then we'll get a little fancy. So thin, pressure is going on, we're loosening up, and we're connecting. I like to kind of roll through that connection there so that it makes it a little bit of a more thin line. You can kind of see where the connection is. Another thing you can do to hide that connection point, and how we talked about getting fancy, is that you can do a nice little O, and then you can circle back and you can make a loop. So there's your letter O. Or something that you'll also see with your ovals is you're going thin to thick to thin, and then you're covering with a thick line. So you've got your O's, you've got your A's. You're also going to see this with your D's. Good. So you've got your ovals, upstrokes, downstrokes, overturns, underturns, some compound curves. We just did some ovals, and now let's talk loops. So we just did one of them here. So we're going to do a nice ascending loop. So we're going to go thin, 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 apply pressure, thick. So you see that in that letter D right there. This is also your letter L. So you're doing a nice thin to thick. And then on the reverse of that, we're going to talk descending loops. So we're going to go nice and thick to thin. J or P. Or on the reverse side of that, we can go the other way, thick to thin. There's your letter Q. Good. So you've got your upstrokes, your downstrokes, your overturns, underturns, compound curves, ovals, and now your loops. So this is really therapeutic for me. I like to just sit here and play with some of these. Practicing these again and again is what's going to get you even better at your words as you go. So good. Headed back to our little agenda, we talked supplies. So you've got your markers of any form, Sharpies, Crayola markers, fancy markers, whatever that looks like, some paper or a pencil, where we just learned those basic strokes. So now a couple reminders for you. And something that I want to remind you is that your handwriting is already a font. So as you can see on like Microsoft Word or wherever you're finding your fonts when you're on the computer, there are so many different kinds of fonts. I'll go ahead and flip you around for a second so you can see me talking with you. So there are so many different kinds of fonts out there, but a great reminder is that your handwriting is already one of them. So you can get really good at, creating your own font out of your own writing. So really celebrate that that's what it looks like for you. And then know that with control and practice, your lettering in different fonts can get easier and easier. Cool. So you're learning brush strokes right now. So for brush hand lettering, we're practicing that. We just did the basic strokes. And then a great reminder here too is that there are so many fonts out there. So brush lettering is not the only font that you can learn how to hand letter. We're going to talk through a couple others here in a little bit and talk about how to make your traditional handwriting look a little extra fancy and pretty. You can use this for anything. So I love to, when I'm at a family gathering, I like to make little name cards. So I might just take like a basic piece of paper, fold it in half, and now you've got a little table plate name card. So you can write people's names on it, make dinner feel a little extra fun and fancy that night. You can make great little gifts out of these. You have your name tag. You can always decorate your name tag with this. Make a sign for your room. Whatever that looks like. I really like to write like poetry. So I like to take time because I think it helps things sink in a little bit more when I'm writing it. It helps me really feel and listen to the words that are being said. So I like to do that with poetry or a really good quote that I like. So I practice my hand lettering that way. But for you, that could look different. And I re-taught myself how to do cursive. So cursive writing isn't taught in very many places right now, which is okay. But you can teach yourself that by practicing something that you like to write. So I really liked a poem in college, and I used to practice just my calligraphy and my basic cursive handwriting by writing that poem out. So know that you can practice in a bunch of different ways. Cool. Let's connect some of these basic strokes now. Going back over here. So we are on the connecting page. Here are your basic strokes again. If you didn't get a good look at those, make sure you can always screenshot this. You can keep this for yourself and practice along. So we're moving on to the connecting page. Let's go ahead and pick a different color. Feeling orange. I know, I think we might end up with some camp colors here, if that tells you anything. So I've got my orange marker. A word that is really good to practice with is actually the word mint. So we're gonna go ahead and practice. So we've got a nice downstroke. And this is a great reminder that picking up your pen is so important to hand lettering. So don't think that you can connect all of your words so easily. You wanna make sure that you pick up your pen and then go again. So we did our thick downstroke. You're gonna practice one of those overturns. So we're gonna go up and down and up and down. There's your underturn and a nice thick stroke here with a little underturn again. Thick downstroke, picked up my pen. Another thick compound curve here. And another really tall downstroke with an underturn at the end. You're gonna add a little dot. And then I really like to get flourishy with my T crossing. So I add a little elongated compound curve there. And you've got the word mint. Great. So practice with mint. You can practice with words like camp. So let's go ahead and use some of what we just learned. You're gonna do the start of the oval for the word camp. So you're gonna go up, thick down curve, and out. This one has a little bit more of a thin line to the right. You're using your oval to help you get that. Thick downstroke, thick, overturn, overturn, thick downstroke. Our loop right there. Camp. I got a request to practice with the word rose. Practicing uppercase and lowercase is going to be really tricky too. So you can know that you can practice. Uppercase can look a little bit different. So this is where you might need to go back to some of your learning how to do cursive, which we can also touch base on, but ours can get a little tricky. So I'm just going to do a nice lowercase r. So we're going to go up, over, down. A nice oval. This is the point where you might say, Alexa, we didn't learn how to do downstrokes like an S right there. We didn't, but you're thinking back to your downstroke that you did over here, and you're just applying it on an angle with a loop. So just like you did with these loops over here, that's your J. So using your J or your P, you made your loop over here, and you're just continuing it. And you did a nice loop up to it, and there's your S. So this is the point where you might want to go and practice some of these letters on your own. So let's go ahead and go through the alphabet really quickly to see how it looks. So we're going to practice with our A, B. Again, you can get fancy here, but we're going to just do a nice loop. Pick up my marker, a loop this way, C, so there are those ovals. D's, I like to do loops on those. E is going to look really similar to your ovals. You're just having a nice thin stroke here and then up to a thick stroke here. F is your loops in both directions. You can always add little tails onto your letter too, which will help you start to practice these connections. E, F, G. So there's another oval with a thick down loop. H, we're going to go overhead, and then you're going to do a nice little loop here. I is nice and simple. J, we're going the other direction. K's are going to get a little bit tricky too. So we got that nice loop up. You're going to do a little bit of a baby loop here, out, and a thick line down. So K's might take some practice. I still have to practice them. K, L, M is a great one to practice on. Same thing with N. It's a downstroke, up and down. You've practiced these O's with your ovals, P's. Q, we're going to go the opposite direction. Now, note that I'm not connecting any of them here. So I'm just practicing the letters standalone. You can always, as you get better and better, you can start by practicing them together. So let's do R and S together so you can see what that looks like. So R, we're going up, a little bit of pressure on that cross, and a pressure as we go down. We're connecting to that S, so nice and light up, thick down, around, and a tail. Good, so nice little connection point there. That wasn't too hard. T, you can get flourishy, or you can just do a nice little boop, cross it. U, V, you can also get fancy here and do a little loop at the top, or if you're looking for another, you can just do it really simple. So V, and then you connect it with that little extra connection point. W, so your M, you're just doing some underturns instead. W. X is going to be your compound curve. So X, and you're crossing backwards. And then Y. And then Z is also a little tricky. So you're thick here, cross thin, thick down, and loop. So we just practiced our alphabet in lettering. So feel free to use that little chunk of the video, go back, repeat it, do it as many times as you'd like. This will start to really help you as you get better and better. Amazing. So fonts. So we just connected all of these words. We just practiced our alphabet a little bit. You saw as we connected some of those words at the top. Another word we can practice with here. So let's practice connecting T. We're gonna go into the U. I like to pick up my pens on U's. We're gonna go together. Can you guess what I'm writing? tuba. Cross that T. And now we've got a nice little camp tradition. Awesome. So you practiced mint tuba camp. You know, practice what you can. Some good things to remember here is that as you're practicing, as you're learning and connecting these words, practice with words that you already write a lot. So some words that I might write a lot, or one word that I might write a lot, we're going to go A. It's my name. And that helps so that, you know, you already write this in your own hand lettering a lot. And so now you just practice it in a new kind of letter. So write what's familiar to you, write what you're excited about. Just make sure that you're writing that way. Good. So let's talk about some fonts. So we're going to turn the page to a nice clear page. So you just got to see brush lettering. So for review, we'll put the little name of them here. So brush letters. And that's going to be that we just did, but it's a great one to practice with. Camp. So your brush lettering is that, you know, very popular font right now, where you connect the words using thick and thin strokes. Now I'm going to switch over. We're going to do kind of a mock one. So as you're learning how to do this, what you can do that's also really easy, I'm going to pull out my Sharpie. I've got a couple different kinds here. So I've got Sharpies, I've got some Bic Sharpies. They all do the same thing. So a little bit different. You're not going to get as much of a thick stroke on that, and it's really hard to move that pen in a thick stroke. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the fact that it has a thinner stroke, and I'm going to write the same way that I just did. And this is how I really started to practice brush lettering. You'll note that I have very porous paper here, and so it's going to bleed a little bit. You can see it's getting a little bit fuzzy on that A. That's okay. It just means that this paper doesn't love Sharpies as much as it was loving the Crayola markers. So you've got your word camp here, and now what you do is you think about where your downstrokes were in this. I can use this camp as a guide, and I know that I did a downstroke here, and so I can thicken it. I might make sure that this line is nice and thin there. I know that there is a downstroke on my A, so I can thicken there, and this was also a downstroke. The M was a downstroke here and here, and one more there. This side of the P was a downstroke, and this side of the P was a downstroke. So now you start to get the same thing that you have here using a thinner marker, and you're just thickening each of those downstrokes. So this is a really easy way to start your brush lettering, especially as you're trying to master what can be really, really challenging, which is making your marker thin and thick on command. That can be really tricky. And so starting with some sort of Sharpie and doing the same thing. So we're in the month of April. I can add some flourishes as we go in. Ooh, you'll see that this is a slowly dying marker, but April. So now you've got your basic cursive here. You could leave that alone. You could just let that be, to dot my I, and that would be totally okay. This is just your basic cursive. There are lots of things you can call that font. You're gonna hear some little barks in the background, and that's the fact that my puppy is asleep and barking in his sleep, which is pretty darn cute. I'll show you a little preview. Sweet, huh? All right, we're back. So you've got your basic cursive now, and now we can practice thickening that just a little bit. So thickening my downstrokes. That A, I didn't actually do a thick downstroke here, but I always can. Good, nice thick there. And you can make these as thick or as thin as you want. They don't have to be super thick. They could just be a little bit thick. It gives you still the same appearance, and it's a little bit more delicate. Good. So you've practiced, you've got some brush lettering, you had your basic cursive. This is where I have a whole mug of these tiny pens. So this is where we're going to talk about that cursive again. So let's go ahead. We've done green, we've done orange. Let's get some blue in here. Got a nice light blue here. So let's stick with, let's do a camp activity, and we're gonna, this is cursive continued. So this is where this font's gonna get a little bit thinner, and that's okay. So if I need to zoom in, you just let me know. Cursive continued. So we're gonna do a camp activity here. I'm gonna add a little flourish at the beginning. We're gonna practice those same loops that we did earlier. Fishing. Good, so you've got that camp activity area. You'll note that that's just a nice, easy cursive. So those cursive letters we practiced earlier, they're nice and connected. When you get really into lettering, you'll hear different terms like leading and kerning. It just means how far and spaced out those letters are. So let's take the same word and we're gonna spread it out a little bit. Keeping the same size font. Still picking up my pen when I need to. Boop, and still dotting the I's. So same word you had here, just really spread out. So that's a good way to take any of your words and you can make it just a little bit fancy. And now let's add a little bit of flourish. So we're gonna teach you one more kind of word, one more kind of font that's really cool to use. So I'm gonna take a nice lighter font color. So I've got some yellow here, which is gonna be tricky to see, but bear with me. We'll actually start with purple so you can see it, and then we'll move to yellow so you can see the fancy side of it. So we're gonna use just some all capital letters, and we'll use the word archery. So similar to how you practiced with your brush lettering, you're gonna go up, thin, down, thick, cross. Down, thick, pick up my marker. I'm gonna make this loop just a little bit longer, and then a tiny little tail on that. You're gonna make a C, really down thick, down thin, cross thin, down thick, out thin. It's really tricky as you're writing slowly to keep in mind the spelling of your words. Archery, so down thick, up thin, and a little stand on it. So you've got archery. So this is a way just to do some all capital letters. It still looks nice. You can use this to label things. It always looks really pretty labeled. So you've got some fancy all capital words. You can also do just really thin writing. So we're going to do the word little. And this might be very similar to your own handwriting. And so maybe this is a place to start, is just controlling your hand a little bit. And little bit. So nice, thin. We kept it on the thin side of the marker. Kept it nice and controlled for good practice. All right, so we did archery, we did a little bit. We're gonna go to a fresh. So you've got a little recap, you got some brush lettering up there. We did some brush lettering just by thickening our downstrokes using a Sharpie or a marker that just might have one way that you can use that marker. So Sharpies, your really thin pens you can do this with. We talked a little bit about cursive writing, so just some nice, easy, simple writing, and you can make it increasingly fancy by spreading those words out. You can also make it really thin. We're gonna scooch over here. I'm gonna give you a slight variation on the brush lettering. You're gonna see a brush pen now. So let's pick a fun color. Let's get you a blue. So these are brush pens. What you're gonna notice here is that one side looks like a paintbrush. So that's why they're a brush pen. The other side is really thin. So let's do some words. Go a little taller so I have some room here. Good. So practicing a word that you already practiced earlier, let's do mint. So we're pressing down, you'll see it makes a little bit of a noise, that's okay. You're gonna do a thin up, thick down. Thin up, thick down. Now these ones are a little bit harder to control than your Crayola. They're really flexible, which is good as you get going because you can go from thick to thin really easily. But again, they're very flexible, which makes them really hard to control. So as you practice a lot, getting these ones means that you have really good control over your hand. So we just did mint. You can start to use this to do my eye. And then we're going to use the last word to teach you a little bit, something a little bit fun. You'll notice that, again, harder to control this pen a little bit. So a little tricky. Actually, we'll do the last word the same. There's that M we've practiced so much, going into your S. Good. So we know that one. And then, as we get fancier, one of the things you can do to start playing with that brush lettering is you can get a little bit bouncy with it. So we're gonna use the word hello as example. This is a great one because you might use it a lot. I use it a lot. So we've got our H, and I'm gonna go really far down with that H. So it looks a little bit funny there, but we're gonna go ahead and use the E down here. We're gonna bounce the L back up. This one's gonna be a little bit lower. And that's bouncing. So you're down, up, or down, sorry, up, down, a little lower, and then right in between. So as you get going, you've got writing these pretty straight and flat. You can always use a nice ruler as you're getting started to know if you're writing on a straight line. I like to practice with, these might be reminiscent of early school. So like kindergarten, they gave you those dotted and dashed line practice papers. I loved those. I think those keep your fonts really, really flat and clear. And then as you're going, you can always get a little bit more fancy and do those bouncing. So see, that does not fall on that ruler very well. So that's a little bit bouncy. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about combining some of these fonts. So a great way to do this I'm gonna use some yellow, so bear with me if you can't see this for a second, but know that you'll get to see it in the end. So yellow, we're gonna use that all caps letters. That's okay, you can kind of see it. All caps letters to go. Pushing down, light. Keep that light. On my S's, I like to do some really thick or some really tall S's. So we're working on combining some letters. If you're just tuning in with me now, my name is Alexa. I'm the assistant camp director, and we are hand lettering. So we've learned some of the basic maneuvers to get you hand lettering. We've connected those letters. We've practiced some different fonts, and now we're working on combining some of those fonts to get you a really pretty end result. So this is one that I love to do. I have a bullet journal. I like to journal a lot, and this is a really clean font that lets me play around a lot. So I've got sunshine written out. I'm gonna give that just a second to dry, and then you'll note I got my little thin pen here, and I'm gonna go over it with that really thin cursive. So we had that thin cursive right here. We had our thick capital letters here, print fonts, and now we're doing a little bit of both. So I'm gonna add a fun little curly tail. And we're doing that same really long cursive font. Now you've got sunshine. So you can see how that combination of fonts here keeps it really clean looking, really pretty looking, and is a really great way to start lettering. I love to do this one all the time. It helps me label things when I'm writing in my journal, or you can see it a little bit with my agenda that we had for the day. If I wanted to make that heading a little bit more fun, I can go through and just add cursive. And while it might be a little trickier to see on the purple, you can still see it. Dot my I. Yep, you can still see it just enough that it lets you know that it's a little bit more fun. So you've got your basic font layered with your cursive, and then something that you can also do, I really love, and I'll show you one last font here before we finish up. So again, just to recap, we've got our brush lettering here, our kind of mock brush lettering here. So we started with cursive, thickened our downstrokes. We've got some traditional cursive here, some really spread out cursive, some all caps with that thick downstroke, some all non-caps, so all lowercase letters, nice and thin. Over here we've got brush lettering done with a brush pen. We did some bouncing of our brush lettering, and then we layered our all caps and our cursive to give us just kind of a more fun font. So now we're gonna shift pages one more time, and we're gonna do an all caps, really thin letter, and I'm gonna show it to you a couple of ways. So let's go ahead, I'm gonna grab this dark blue. Got another marker here, so keeping with our Crayola markers, you do it in nice thin font, so all caps, and we're going to use the word canoe. And I like to do it nice and tall so that you can see how nice and thin and very plain looking that font is. But this is a nice upper caps, thin font. This pairs really well. So as you get really fancy, you can talk a little bit about pairing your fonts. So if I wanted to do like fishing and canoeing, so those are the things that we have at our waterfront. So I've got my brush font here. eyes. And then what I want to do is do that nice thin font. So we just did canoe up here. We've got our nice brush letter font here, fishing, and then we're going to do a little plus. Canoeing is kind of a silly word, but here we are. And now you've got just like a nice little paired together word, and note how you're going to get really fun at spacing these. So I like to put them right between those two really long down strokes, so you can start to pair your font. So we did that nice uppercase, and we did that in a little bit of a thicker pen, so you can see that there, and then we paired it with the brush lettering font. So we've got that one, and then we can do the high ropes course in the zip line. So let's do high ropes. I'm gonna do that nice thick font here. High ropes. If there's anything you guys want to see lettered, don't forget to comment, and I will make sure I can do it for you by the end of this video. I know one of my favorite things is to find some resources online and watch other people letter. That helps me learn. So if that's helpful to you and you want to practice a letter but you want to see it done first, I'm happy to write that for you. Or if you are not watching this live and still want that, you just let me know in the comments and I will comment with a nice little video of it done slowly. So we've got high ropes, and I'm going to go ahead and pair this so it's a slightly different font. And we're going to use green, and we're going to do plus zip line. And Bells is the expert. She could have told me if the zip line is 1 or 2 words, but we wrote it out with 2 words. So you've got high ropes and zip line. You used similar fonts. This has your thick downstroke caps letters. This has your high ropes. You got that right, Z. And this has your nice thin uppercase letters. So even that little pairing is very clean. You can use different fonts to make it nice and fun. And then if you want to add just one more layer to it, you can go ahead and do, whoop, here's your over top cursive, high, and then ropes. And now you've got 2 fonts combined, really 3 fonts combined. So you've got your uppercase thick stroke, you've got your cursive, and you've got your uppercase thin stroke. So those all pair really well together, and you can keep practicing which different kinds of letters pair together. And then lastly, working with your really thin pens, you can also do that same. So we practiced canoe up here. Let's go back up to that canoe, and let's go ahead and add one more. We're going to use this nice thin to do the same one. So same one, thinner marker. And remember how we talked about that letting and kerning earlier. So it can be how tall your words are. You can do this much smaller, so we can do this. I'll zoom in for you. So that's a little less tall looking. That's nice and short. You've got, oop, got it. So you've got 3 different kinds of canoes there. And then what you can also do is we're working on spacing too. So you could get really tall here. Nice big canoe. And then you can get a really spacious canoe. So, let's see. I love my bullet journal, and I'm happy to answer questions about it. If you guys ever want to learn about bullet journaling, we can also do a nice little activity area where we talk about bullet journaling and also just regular journaling and how powerful that can be. So you'll see the spacing here is a little bit further spaced out, looks a little bit different. This is a little bit taller. You've got your medium and you've got your small. So you can practice all of those. Make sure you get a good view there. So you've got lots of options, and that's kind of your paired fonts. So just a recap of what we learned today. We did some basic strokes. So we did our upstrokes, downstrokes, overturns, underturns, compound curves, ovals, loops. You learned how to connect some of those words. You'll note that some of my markers bleed. That's that Sharpie. You do want to watch out if you're working on some papers, and especially in a notebook like this, you're going to have some markers that are more bleed friendly. These basic strokes did not bleed. So like my Crayola markers are not bleeding, but these ones, that one certainly did. We connected some words. We worked on our alphabet over here. And then we talked fonts. So we talked brush lettering. We talked simple brush lettering. So just thickening your downstrokes. We did some cursive, so all together, a little bit more spread out. We did your thick stroke, uppercase, thin stroke, lowercase. We worked up with a little brush pen here, some bouncing, and some compound fonts here. And then lastly, we did a little bit more with those uppercase, thinner letters, and then also some pairing of fonts here and here. So let's take a look at that agenda, see where we fell one more time. We worked through, we talked supplies. Remember to use anything that you have in your house first and foremost. There is so much you can do with what you already have, and that's a great place to start. So we used mostly Crayola markers today, and it turned out pretty darn good. So use what you have. Supplies, use any paper you have, ask your parents before stealing all of their printer paper. That's going to be really important. We talked through your basic strokes, a great reminder that your hand lettering or your own handwriting is yours uniquely. So remember that that is already a font in and of itself. You can see this is my handwriting right here, and you can see that I love to connect my letters, but I don't always write in just cursive. I do a mix of cursive and just like regular handwriting. So your handwriting is already a font. Play with that as much as you can. It's so unique and so fun, just like you. There are a ton of different fonts out there, and we touched on a lot of them, but find ones that you really like and practice those. We connected all of our letters together. We practiced our alphabet in here. We did some fonts, and we talked about thickening your strokes to give you that same look. And then we practiced and played. So a great reminder here as we finish up, pick favorite and familiar words. So you got to see me practice hand lettering my own name. That is really cool. That is a really great way to practice because you already know how to spell your name. You already know how to write it in your own handwriting. And now you get to do it in different handwritings. So that's a really great one to do. Also practice words that you love practicing. So there are really fun words. You can do really long words for great practice. I love to letter some camp words for practice. That helps me a lot. And then lastly, you can watch others, copy, and repeat. So as you're practicing, practice makes perfect, and there's not really such thing as perfect in handwriting, and that's amazing. It just means you can keep practicing. So I love, love, love to find resources where I get to watch other people letter. And if that's something you like to do, you are welcome to let me know. I will practice and send on this Facebook group in the comments below any of those letters and words you're looking to learn how to write, and we can talk through it nice and slow. So you can watch others, you can find different resources on like Pinterest and Instagram and Facebook, all have really great resources, and you can find lots of different ways to do this. So I'm gonna go ahead and come back to speaking to you here. Again, pardon this bar, it's helped me stay hands-free as we're writing. Does anybody have any questions? go ahead and comment them in the post below so that I can make sure and get back to you. Also, if there's anything you want to practice writing, go ahead and put that down there too. I'm happy to guide you through what some of those letters and words look like. We can figure this out together, but thank you for learning to hand letter with me for today. I really love it, and I find it to be really relaxing. And go slow. It can look really cool when you're doing it all really quickly, but the reality is slow and steady is winning that race. So as you're making your letters, just practice where you're putting your pressure on your pen. Take deep breaths as you're writing. If you're all excited and nervous, your hand lettering is going to reflect that. It's going to be all over the place. So make sure you take a deep breath and do it nice and slow and calm and cool and collected. Awesome. Thank you guys for joining me today. If you practice your lettering, make sure, take a picture of it. We want to see it. Show us what you're practicing. Show us what you're doing. I hope that you're having a great day. Happy Monday and happy almost Earth Day. Can't wait to see you guys again soon. See you later.